Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month is March. It's one of my favorite months. Anyway, I'm a little biased, but this month is also our theme, which is discovering what is next. An example of this, being in the mental health field, is this may be an opportunity. You may recognize as an issue or something that you need to address, which may lead to insight, but it always constantly changes. You may be okay one day, but then you discover other issues and other things you would like to change. And the point is, change is inevitable. Inevitable. Today we have a new guest. I've been trying to get her on here for a while. Thank you so much, Brea, for joining us and sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to share with those listening around the world, in the States. If you're in the States, 9AA is a new suicide crisis lifeline. If you are in crisis and you need help, I encourage you to find it. Resources look different for everyone. So I don't like reinventing the wheel. If something works for you that's positive, I say keep doing it. Keep doing it. So I just want to say, Brea, you're new to the podcast. A lot of times I say people say it better than me. One book that I liked was Man Finding Meaning from Viktor Frankl, and one of his quotes he said, and I want to spark our conversation, is when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. What comes to mind when you hear this quote, Brea?
Yeah, so I feel like most of the time in our adult lives and even childhood, we're faced with many instances where we're unable to change a situation. So that calls for us to do the work internally to make ourselves more patient, more loving, kind, joyful, peaceful, whatever God calls us to be in that situation. And therapy actually taught me this because I've been faced with so many situations where I feel like I couldn't change the situation. And that is what sparks a lot of my anxiety, a lot of my unrest, and all those kinds of things. So my therapist was telling me there are some things that you literally cannot change. You have to be okay with that, or you're just going to be unhappy, be anxious all the time, and that's not a place that you want to be. So we have to do the work inside of us to become more patient in that situation, to change our mindset in that situation. So this therapy can teach you some good things, and that's what comes to my mind when I hear that quote.
I think one of the best conversations, I guess some of the most important ones, happen within myself. The conversations I have by
Yes.
myself, I might have, those pivotal moments when I used to joke. I think this comedian said it this way: when you're in college, I know you just got out of college. Does all my friends hate me, or should I just go to bed? It's like you kind of have this repetitive kind of cycle because we can talk ourselves into or out of everything. But with
Yes.
all fairness, I do feel just like you said, having that moment, and you only are able to have those moments if you allow yourself. You know what I mean? If you
Yes.
allow yourself, if you're gonna be always the best for others, when is it gonna be the best for you? Does that
Right.
make sense? So I think change is an adjustment, and sometimes it's a verbiage that I think helps me. Change is adjustment, not abandonment of what I'm trying to do or what didn't work. The situation we have
Right.
experienced may not be as clear presently. What does it say? 20 hindsight is 2020. I look back at things, I'm like
Yeah.
cringy. I'm like, why did I do that? Why did
Why
I
would
say
we
that?
do
Why
that?
did I stay there? But
Yes, definitely.
I'm really bad at like people's names, so I'm gonna probably mess up the last part of this name. But I think it's Veronica Togaleva. I apologize. But the quote is amazing. It says, "To know yourself, you must sacrifice the illusion that you already do." I think I want to hear your opinion after. Quickly, I think this is true all the time. We're always unfinished. So for me to
Hmm.
know myself is kind of like, well, what time period,
Right.
and what day.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts, Bria?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like we are ever evolving humans where we are different versions of ourselves than we were at a time before and in a time in the future. And a lot of times I think that we feel like we know ourselves so well, what
Mm-hmm.
makes us tick, why we do certain things. But the Bible in Jeremiah 17, 9 through 10
Mm-hmm.
says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Mm-hmm.
I, the Lord, search the heart, I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruits of his doings.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we are actually led by our flesh and our emotions. And we need to take a step back and do some self-reflection and humbling of ourselves to really figure out what it is, why do we do what we do, what makes
Mm-hmm.
us tick, and also to just kind of get a new perspective, because sometimes we do have that blind spot where we don't see what it is that we're doing when other people can easily pick that out because they have a different perspective of us.
I totally agree. I remember one of because I wasn't always in the faith. I remember later I actually got baptized in, I think, 30 or something, like early
Mhm.
30s. And I remember one of the pastors that I met, and he said, "Your life is always going to be unfinished." And I didn't
Right.
understand it at that time, but it really helps me today because if we don't have this urgency to kind of completeness, the
Right.
rightness, the completeness, it's okay to kind of make these adjustments because you're not living to someone else's aspirations. And
Right.
accountability when you're around positive people is not a bad thing. If you
Mhm.
want to get better, it's okay, but sometimes that's why I think generalization can be problematic to yourself,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
I would say, if let's just say, because I work in the mental health field now, if someone has depression, I will not say that the person A, person B will positively would do well one if I tell them, this would work. I
Right.
really don't like that. It
Right.
usually is not best practice. The best thing is
Right.
client centered. So like I said in the beginning, um, I don't like reinventing the wheel. If the church is something that has been positive for you, I'm going to reinforce that. It's something that, because you need a constant connection.
Right.
But if it's something negative, not to say it's all negative. I'm just trying to, at the same time, it's built on the person itself. So when I
Right.
think about our lives and it being unfinished, it gives me a little bit of grace, and actually, at
Yeah.
times, gets me to piece things together and say, hey, I need time. If I don't respect my time, and I think you know this, Brea, no one else will. Even the ones
Yeah.
that care about you the most, they don't know your situation
Right.
if you don't prioritize. You mentioned, I find a lot of my strength, especially now, is in my faith. Proverbs 19 verse 2 in the English Standard Version
Mhm.
says, "Desire without knowledge is no good, not good, and whoever
Mhm.
makes haste with his feet misses his way." We need to
Mhm.
slow down. I do my
Yep.
best work when I slow down. uh,
Yes.
a lot of times we're too busy doing everything.
Right. Right.
It's humbling when you realize how little we can do, but we just do that one thing and do it very well. Any thoughts of this
Yeah.
verse, and what comes to mind when you hear this?
I feel like it's so important for us to practice grace and empathy with ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the type of people that can practice grace and empathy and love and so kind to everybody else. But when it comes to myself, I'm my biggest critic. I'm my biggest bully. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just so important for us to be able to practice that with ourselves and treat ourselves the way that we treat our best friends, our family, our loved ones, the way that God treats us, and the way that God treats others as well. So to be able to say, okay, yesterday I completed 8 out of 8 tasks. Today I just got out of bed. And when you have depression,
Mm-hmm.
that is honestly one of the biggest things, is being able to get out of bed, even to do something. But even to get out of bed is a big task. It's a big mountain that you just climbed. And so I think it's so important that you're not even comparing yourself to yourself throughout different days, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just being present in the moment with the
Mm-hmm.
strength that God gave you to finish whatever task you have ahead, and be able to say, okay, I did as much as I can do today. My best looks like this today, and then let it go.
I totally agree, and I think at the same time, it's more like we kind of understand that it's unfinished and it's gonna all ever change. And as we build, I guess, how we have those internal talks, and the
Right.
comparing never works well. I know it didn't work for
No,
me well. It
ever.
never does work well. But what works well is when you're inspired to do something. You're like, okay,
Hmm.
I did this, and I want to do better in this. And
Right.
I feel that has that shift. I think when accountability is not a bad thing. When you're
Mhm.
like, you know what, I want to better myself, not because everyone else tells me to, not because it's probably the wise thing to do, not because it's
Mhm.
the most frugal thing. It's just like when I went to school, went for business at first, and I got my degree. But one thing I always took from it was, how do you invest really kind of paves the way. If you invest yourself short
Right.
term, you'll get short term results. If you invest
Right.
long term, so if I invest long term, then it doesn't mean that everything has to happen today. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna get everything done today. Doesn't
Exactly.
mean I have to get
Exactly.
everything today because everyone else
Yes.
got to everything. It allows me some room because I am planning long term versus short term, and you can kind of see that, especially in how people address things.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the way that God even gets to teach us patience because we have our own plans and our own timeline. We want everything done. Like I find even in my business, like I want to hit these benchmarks. I want these things to happen. And God is like, no, your character is not ready to handle that yet. You
Mhm.
need the time to grow and develop and all those kinds of things. And it's even funny because I feel like everyone always tries to have a new workout routine every new year and everyone wants to be healthier and stuff. But I personally started to develop a workout routine because I have tension headaches and migraines. So my neurologist is like, you need to be more active. And I'm like, okay, true. And also, for mental health and stuff, it's just good. So before, when I was trying to get into a workout routine, it was more, I want to be fit, I want to look this type of way, whatever. And it was a small health portion as well. But for now, it's a different mindset where it's like, okay, I'm not going to be upset at myself if I don't work out every day, but I've actually had a desire to work out every day because I have this mindset where it's, I am doing this because I want to work out. I want to feel better.
Mm,
I want to have less headaches. I want to be more mentally stable. And it
mhm,
feels good when I do this. And it's not for anybody else. It's not for vain
mhm.
reasons.
Yeah, I think it's great to start there because the thing is, obviously, we're not islands, but I want to live long. Obviously,
Right.
we'll have a long life with my wife. you know,
Right.
you kind
Right.
of thing. You kind of plan indirectly. Obviously, it comes from within those talks, and I feel sometimes even yeah, it's great to be healthier, but if you hate your life, I'll say this really candidly: if you hate your life, why would you eat broccoli? Why would you go for a run? Honestly, those things I both are. I don't mind broccoli, but I'm saying like if you want to get better, and sometimes in my people muscle their way through, and they get bitter real quick if things don't go
Yes.
their way. They work out like unhealthy, and it's all not for them. It's for
Right.
everyone else, and
Exactly.
for I think we're talking about this what's next, this theme of it's important to understand, just like in the quote before, you can prepare yourself. No, you can know yourself, but you don't really know yourself because it keep changing. I'm not 20-year-old Rob. I'm not skinny
Right.
Rob anymore. I'm not 30-year-old Rob. I'm now uh, early 40s. But anyway, at the same time, it's okay because at the same time, if we're giving ourselves grace, if we're saying, you know what, I'm doing this long term. I want to be around
Right.
my friends and families long term. I'm not the best at everything, but I'll
Right.
do I'll do good at what I can do good at. And the things I'm good at, I want to share with those so they could have the opportunity to feel and experience what I've experienced. So it's just one of those
Exactly.
things. You give it back. And I want to
Yeah.
ask you, with new guests, I give an opportunity for you to share a little bit about your journey, what brought you to where you're at today. Anything you feel comfortable sharing, Bria. The floor is yours.
Yeah, of course. So y'all better buckle in, sit tight. so I let's start a little bit where we are and then we'll go back to the past and work our way back to where we are right now. So I'm 20 years old. I just graduated UCF with my bachelor's in event management. Um, I did dual enrollment in high school, so that's how I was able to graduate 2 years early. But I think I would say everything kind of really started when I got into an abusive relationship at 16 years old. And it wasn't even something that I realized was abusive until I went to therapy. So a few months after we broke up, I started having panic attacks. I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. I was hyperventilating. I was like, Dad, I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know what's going on. And he didn't know what was going on either, because that's not something that any of us have ever experienced in our family ever before. So it was totally new. Then I started having them more frequently. And then I got in April of 2019. So it was not fun at all. And then I ended up developing post-concussion syndrome for a year and a half afterwards, where I was nauseous, had a headache, sensitivity to light, brain fog, like for every single day for almost a year and a half. And it was really hard, because coming from being a person who was student government president in high school, all of high school, playing varsity music, all these kinds of high achieving quote unquote things, to being somebody who can barely piece a sentence together, who stutters, who has brain fog, who is at a loss for words, who can't, like I said, pull a sentence together. Super hard to look at the screen to even be able to complete my homework. Always tired, that brain fog, always nauseous, headache. You didn't have the energy to do anything because you always feel horrible. So I was in and out of doctor's offices for years. And I think that definitely contributed a little bit more to my anxiety and depression. So at that point, we didn't know that I had PTSD. I hadn't been diagnosed with anything yet. I just know that, it was so mental health was becoming more trendy, I would say. So like there were definitely things on the internet about anxiety and depression. So when I was reading those things, I was definitely resonating with them. I was like, okay, maybe this is something that I do have. But coming from a Caribbean household, they don't really acknowledge that as, okay, this is something that you think you might have, let's go check it out. It's like, you always want to have something, or you just need to pray, or like you're stronger than that, but it's not something that's really fully understood. So fast forward, 2020, the day before my birthday, you were actually there when everything went down, Robert. My best friend died, and then COVID shutdown literally happened the next day, which was my birthday. Period in my life. And so that was really difficult for me, because I was a senior in high school, so we didn't get to do any of the senior prom, senior pictures, senior walkthroughs, even graduation. And so that was definitely a hard thing, because it's something that you look forward to your entire lives. It's something that you can't wait to have your moment to shine, to just look back at everything that you've done and kind of a wrap up to that chapter in your life. And then I went off to college in the middle of a pandemic, right, in August of 2020. And I had this really weird roommate that wasn't really a great fit. And so I ended up getting a room change. But because it was COVID, there were 80% capacity, I think, that was either empty or we were at, something like that. But we had a lot of empty rooms. So they gave me an empty room, and I had no roommate. And so as an extrovert, being isolated, not going out to classes because they're on Zoom, not really going out to shop because, you don't want to catch COVID, not having friends because there's nowhere to make friends in the middle of a pandemic when everyone's on lockdown, I completely isolated. My mental health declined like severely. The depression was bad. And I also started birth control for a uterus problem, which I would not recommend to anyone ever. I think it's one of the worst things that you could do, is kind of manipulate your hormones that way. My depression and anxiety declined so severely. And I say that because when I stopped taking them against what my doctor recommended, I started to feel so much better. So I think that it gives you a little bit of that kind of empowerment to say, I know that this is what they're prescribing me, and this is not working. So fast forward to 2021, February, I started therapy for the first time. My mental health was at its all-time low. I was having panic attacks all the time. I was barely getting out of bed, barely eating, barely a productive member of society, a functioning member of society, never mind productive. And so I finally started taking therapy, and I realized all of these things that I had no idea. I thought were my personality, that I thought were my personality traits, were trauma responses. I had PTSD. I didn't know that I had. I didn't even know that I was in an abusive relationship. I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and then later on I was diagnosed with ADHD. So all of these things that I thought were just who I was, not false. They're actually responses to these experiences that I've had, and also responses to my disorders. So after that, I kind of had an eye opening because I was like, wow, how many other people have absolutely no idea that this is not the way that they have to live for the rest of their lives, that there is a
Mm,
way to get help, that there is a way to improve and get better. Because I've been a Christian my whole life, but reading the Bible isn't the only way to get help, isn't the only way to heal.
mm,
It's a big part of it, but it's really hard to apply that stuff when you feel like you want to kill yourself, when you feel like you can't go
mm,
on, when you're hopeless, when you're super anxious, you can't even focus. You need ways to tone that down so you can kind of focus now on that Bible, on that healing, on that word that God has provided for you. So I
mm,
think therapy was a big part of my healing process, but God actually helped me to start my brand, Dear Self Co, my Christian mental health brand. We actually I came up with the idea at the end of 2021, and we launched in
mm,
2022. And we've almost completed our first full year as operating business, which is so exciting. But I really wanted it just to be a place for people, especially Christians who feel like who get that those answers, if you're not praying enough, you're not reading enough. It's like, but I am,
mm,
and it's not working. I don't know what to do.
mm,
So you feel like you're that Christian, all that kind of stuff. My brand is here to circumvent that and help people know that, yeah, you can go get therapy. That's not a sin. Just like when you break your arm, you need a
mm,
doctor. When your mind is
mm,
not where it needs to be, you can go get therapy. There are tools for this. God has created roles and people for this to help you navigate this area of your life. And so I actually created affirmations that were based off of, I actually started off using index cards, writing I
mm,
am, to try and reframe my mindset about how I think about myself and put that kind
mm,
of on how God looks at me. What is my actual identity? What is my actual character?
mm,
What is this? And not what my anxiety and depression have been telling me that it is. So I started writing I am, trying to find something that's relevant to the verse that I was studying. And so I actually turned this into an affirmation card deck where I have the verse where you can study, but this is kind of the context that it's in. This is what it's kind of saying, and this is how you should kind of be looking at it. And it kind of helps
mm,
you to relate what the Bible is saying about you
mm,
and how it relates to you. And so you are able to create a new mindset based off what the Bible is telling you. And so it helps you kind of to feel connected to the Bible, connected to God, because if you don't understand God or you had a misconception of Him, this is a way for you to fix that and circumvent that. And also, anyone who's been to therapy knows journaling is like one of the main things. So I created a journal as well with the I ams on top of it. So you can kind of develop that good spiritual routine in the morning. It's the first thing you do, and you can frame the way that your day is going to go by starting to speak to yourself positively with these good affirmations and being able to get your thoughts out through that journal. So those are our two best sellers. Then I also created stickers because with those index cards I was drawing on it, I'm a creative, so I thought it would be good to have a space in the journal for you to draw and just get all your creative juices flowing. And then we actually just dropped this anxiety hoodie January
mm,
30th. So it's a hoodie set. So they're orange pants paired with this orange top, and it is so cute. Everyone's loving it. So I loved it because I feel like when I first got my diagnosis, that everyone could just see the anxiety on me. Like that was a big label, like right across my
mm,
forehead. And so it would prevent me from going out to a lot of places and doing a lot of things. And I felt like, why do I feel like this? And if
mm,
other people, I realize that other people go through this too. I'm not the only one that has anxiety or has a hard time going to stores and all these kinds of things. It makes me feel more seen. It makes me feel more comfortable with what I have. Helps me to recognize that it's just a part of me. It's not entirely who I am. So I love wearing this out, and I get so many
mm,
compliments every time I go out. It just makes me feel so comfortable that yeah, I have this
mm,
anxiety, but it's not the end of me. It's not the period. It's not the finish. There's so much more
mm,
to me. And so that's pretty much where I am right now. I just graduated college, so I'm able to praise God, work on this full time. I have the
mm.
support and resources around me, so I'm able to work on this full time and not have to work a part-time job or a full-time job aside, which I'm so grateful for because I get to put all of my energy into the purpose that God has called me to do and help people every single day. It's so fulfilling, and I love being here. So
Thank you so much, Bria. It's your story is, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, in different ways. Especially coming from my mom's South Korean, so not it's not mental health. A lot of times, I funny that generation, our parents, they didn't talk about
Mhm.
this, especially
Right.
Asian cultures. You said Caribbean, even Hispanic. It wasn't talked about. So
Right.
if we're gonna show ourselves grace, we also show our parents grace. They don't understand.
Mhm.
Why would they?
Yes.
How would they? So for like
Exactly.
it's interesting. So when you have that internal dialogue we talked before, it'll allow you to express yourself, and when you give yourself time, like you're getting now, you're allowed to kind of have those talks and understand what's important to you, because that changes. And another thing I like is, um, you know, uh, like I said, I came to the faith later. I remember
Mhm.
when I first started, and I don't know if you know this, it was just I did the sound right, and I used to not listen to the sermon, nothing. I just made sure. I said to myself, I'm gonna make them sound good. That was it. That's all I did. But I showed up every single time. Another thing I remember was just in context of what you're saying is it's kind of like what Martin Luther King said. I didn't have to see the whole staircase. I just had to go one step at a time. And during that journey, I just realized, I might say, oh, these people don't understand me. They couldn't understand me. And I'll say this, and I'm not trying to be callous, but they won't. No,
Right.
no one will really understand you. And
Yeah.
that's okay. The
Yeah.
idea is you're surrounded by positive, supportive people
Right.
on supporting the best they can, at
Right.
the same. And I think when you have those talks, I remember you saying journaling. I wanted to share this real quick. One person, and I think it was a pastor, I used to go, I still go to therapy, but when I was really struggling, he made me change seats, like talk to myself in different seats about what I was
Yeah.
going through. And it was done. I think some therapists in Eastern Europe or Poland started this. It's kind of, you allow you to hear yourself, what you're saying to yourself, whatever negative emotion that may be.
Yeah.
um, and then you mentioned the I am I this pastor friend, he asked me, write a letter to God, and
Mhm.
then write the response God would have for you. It was very cathartic, because at first
Oh,
I was really struggling, like what would I
uh-huh.
write, but it was helpful. It was just like the changing of seats, because family is messy. That you're like, you have these views like, oh, they don't care. I would just say this: they do care about you. They just don't know how to.
Yeah.
That's about it. And for me, I think, especially when you have, if you're self-aware enough of your own situation, and also the people around you and their generation and their context, and
Mhm.
we stop generalizing, then we're like, okay, they're overwhelmed right now. They don't understand what's going on with me. I
Right.
have to be what? A better communicator. I have to say, I'm not doing well.
Yes, yes, that's the hardest thing I would say. I was very bitter for a long time with my parents because I was like, "You don't understand me. You're not making an effort to understand me.
Hmm.
Why can't you just be there for me the way that I need you to be there for me?" How
Hmm.
would they know how to be there for me? They've never had to
Yeah.
do that before. I don't even know what I need to be able to communicate to you what it
Yeah.
is. And they're human beings as well.
Yeah.
So this is something that they have never traversed before. How would they know? So we do have to practice that grace both with them and
Hmm.
ourselves.
And I just want to share everything that Brea has mentioned with her. Um, can you, your can I'm really, what's the company? What's the name of it? So everyone
Dear
can hear it.
Self Co. It's weird. It's a weird name, but dear like the letter
Hmm.
self, SELF Co.
Hmm.
And the website is just dearselfco.us.
All those links will be in the notes, so you can check out what's going on with her. If you want to get the sweater that she's wearing, you can find it there. And I always inspired when people have a bad situation. One person told me life is like life is about playing a bad hand well.
Yep.
In a weird way. I think some people can understand that. Tom Lloyd Quall says every answer can be followed by another question. I want us to be curious again. Remember when we're young and we're curious with things that
Yes.
when we're discovering ourselves. Meet
Hmm.
Brea again. I mentioned you
Yeah.
mentioned you had some diagnosis. I would encourage those listening, and even maybe even yourself. Your diagnosis, yeah, they help you with your treatment, but you're still Brea. You're
Right.
still Brea. You're not Brea depression.
Right.
We can get caught up in it. It is
Yeah.
comforting to kind of have a name that kind of explains what you're going through, but you
Yes.
yourself are still Brea, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you to switch it over to you, Brea. What has been helpful for you when deciding what is next for you? I know you make a lot of changes since 2020, a lot of changes. What was helpful and what was not helpful? And this is more
Yeah.
your own yourself and how you.
Yeah. So I feel like what has been the most helpful for me deciding what's coming next and what to do in the future has been actually talking to myself and asking myself what it is that I want. Do you want to do this because your parents are telling you, because someone is forcing you, because your boyfriend suggested, because your pastor thinks it's a good idea? What is it that you actually want to do with your
Mm-hmm,
life, and why is that? So if it's something that is flesh related, like, yeah, I want to go out drinking every night, is that something that you want to do because
mm-hmm,
it's helpful for you, or is it just something that you're trying to mask something else with, right?
yeah.
So for me, like, I actually went a little bit to the extreme with consulting God, where I wouldn't make any movement until I had exactly what it is that He said, exactly the path. But He never gave me those exact steps, because how am I going to be faith if He just gives me the blueprint and I follow it? That's a puppy. I'm not a puppy. I'm a person.
Mm, mm,
So consulting with God and being obedient despite the opinions from others
mm,
has been the way that I have chosen to move forward.
mm,
Heed wise counsel, yes, but not all counsel is wise. And some are tests to
mm,
see if you will be obedient anyway to what God told you to do and where He told you to go. So the way that you can find out what that is to just be, like you said, stay curious. You have to figure out who that is through His word, figure out what He would say and what would be totally against who He is to say in that direction that
mm,
you're going. And prayer, because the enemy does come and try and lead you a certain way, very tempting, and it's very deceiving. So you
mm,
can think that there's been countless times where I thought something was from God, but it's really just my own anxiety trying to
mm,
steer me astray. And it's not as easy
mm,
as, "Oh, this is my anxiety, okay, now I can move on." It's like, okay, but is it God? It's persistent, it's here, it's something that I can't get rid of in my mind. Why is it still here?
mm.
What do I do
Yeah,
about it?
yeah. And I kind of reminded of just you, a lot of these things are I don't know long term problems. So
Yeah.
if it's let's say a year problem, it's not going to be solved in a week, and
Right.
vice versa. But at the same time, I do like um, when it comes to um, what has been helpful. I do want to piggyback on the idea that we mentioned this a little bit, but our parents, our people who are close to us, they want the best, but they don't know you like you. At the end of the
Right.
day,
Right.
you're the one. They just want you to do well. That's it. My mom. I remember when I was upstairs in Palm Coast Church when I was about to get married. I remember my mom saying to me, like, "Are you okay?" She's mentioning all that. I'm like, "I'm not alone," and she said all this stuff again. I'm not alone anymore, and all this stuff. So the thing was, she wants the best, and parents. It's hard to not. I remember this one conversation I had with a parent. Parent. You want to tie the shoelaces. I'll tell you that much. Parents
Right.
wants to tie the shoelaces, and it's
Right.
hard. It's a predicament. And as
Mhm.
an illustration, you're running late. You're trying to get your kids in the car, and it's easier to tie their shoelaces than you're on
Right.
time. But eventually, you're gonna just have to let them tie their own shoelaces. And I
Yeah.
feel there's a different kind of patience. So I remember that even when my parents or give me set advice that I don't really see eye to eye on,
Right.
um, I know that it's coming from a good place. Okay,
Right.
and at the same time, with I'll say this, and this is just my my experience in working in the mental health field, but also personally, siblings don't make good parents. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this right now. Siblings don't make good parents, and I'm not trying to cause any
Mhm.
conflict, but it's just a different dynamic,
Yeah.
unless there is some, unless there's severe and there's no one else. Of course, you don't
Right.
want anyone, but there's a dynamic that you were kids together. You guys were in the same
Right.
kind of rank system
Right.
in the family, so it's
Right.
harder. Parents, even they want the best for you, just like your family, your loved ones, your friends. But at the same time, if you don't have those internal talks, if you don't take the time, you don't pray, you don't get a second opinion on anything. Everyone, there's no magic pill.
Yeah.
Um, Everything's kind of pieced together. I went through so much acupuncture. I've been poked and prodded so many times in New York. My mom brought me, and I would say at first I'm like, why I don't see it. I was looking at immediate, but I think it was helpful. And some of the
Yeah.
stuff, the herbal things that I went through.
Yeah.
I remember one of the acupuncturists, his old Harabaji, is a grandfather in in Korean. He would say, "You need guts or like courage," and I didn't know what that meant, but I kind of
Uh-huh.
get it in the sense because he was saying that my chi or whatever flow was
Yeah.
blocked
Right.
somewhere, so he was trying to. That's what acupuncture sometimes
Yeah.
stimulates that, but at the same time, I was like, I didn't appreciate it, and it's just like the model. And going back, because we're both in the faith-based community, is church. One person, I meet a person in the community, and they need a ride to church.
Mhm.
Brea, that may be the only thing I do with them, and I gotta be okay with it. you know,
Yeah.
or whatever it may be. So a lot of
Right.
times we're not everything and everyone. We can only
Yeah.
give what we can, what we
Yeah.
have, and
Right.
to kind of wrap up, but also emphasize what we've been talking all the time. Yulia
Mm.
says it this way: if it doesn't matter how strong or well prepared you are, if you have no direction, and the only way you have directions is what we're kind of sharing today.
Right.
Anything you want to comment on this quote or anything else?
Yeah. So, like I said before, I used to be afraid to set goals because I was waiting for God to show me where to go.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there are two extremes to every spectrum, and you don't want to be at either. You don't want to just do things and hope God is behind you later, and then you don't want to not do anything because you're so afraid to make a move without God. There's that balance where you're practicing faith, but also being obedience. So, there's some direction in the Bible, which is a good place to start, and a general direction to go and abide by. And through prayer,
Mm-hmm.
you can get more guidance pertaining to yourself in certain situations. So take care of your mental health, visit my website, and go deeper with God.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I
Of
think I'm
course.
just gonna. It's this, right? Do
Yes.
yourself. Yeah. Uh, the link, so a clickable link will be in the notes. I just want to say thank you so much, Bria, just sharing your insight. Any final thoughts you want to share with those listening? Our audience about anything.
Yeah, I would definitely say have the courage to listen to yourself and trust yourself, because I feel like with me, with my anxiety, a lot of the times I'm not able to trust myself because I don't know where my anxiety stops and my thoughts begin, where it's God telling me or my anxiety speaking. And so there has to come a point where you believe in yourself when you make a decision. You believe that, yes, all things are working towards my good. And yes, even if I do make the wrong decision here, God's going to be there to pick me up. He knows my heart, He knows where I'm at. And so you need to move, you need to make that decision, and you need to prioritize yourself, which
Mhm.
isn't selfish, because if you're not okay, how are you going to be able to fulfill your mission? How are you going to be able to take care of anybody else or do anything for anybody else? So take care of yourself and start trusting yourself to do the right thing.
I would I would even say you can be a little bit selfish, especially if it's something crisis related. If you're really struggling, be
Right.
selfish. Get the help that you need.
Yeah.
Um, when we're kids, at least for me, we're always told to give gifts. Give
Mhm.
gifts well. Be nice,
Right.
not be selfish. But I would say a lot of times we're not, as we grow older, we're not good at receiving gifts. We're not
Yes.
good at receiving gifts. So it's
Yes.
kind of backwards when we're in the faith-based world where we're supposed to be accepting. We have this gift. We have in the core fundamental beliefs, but we're not. We're good at giving, but we're not good at receiving. So I would
Right.
encourage those who are listening. It's okay to receive a gift. If you need help, it's okay to get it. You know,
Yes.
we're all unfinished. I
Yeah.
look back even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was really, really struggling for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And I remember I was very active in high school. And your story kind of reminded me,
Yeah.
very quick, and then
Right.
everything was slower for a
Right.
while. And it was like I was trapped in my mind. Like I
Yeah.
felt everyone around me was mediocre. I couldn't because I felt like I had weights in my brain.
Mhm.
I just felt slower, and it took a lot of time, took a lot of coping, took a lot of therapy, took years, and then eventually I just had to make a choice. I had to make a
Yeah.
choice, and was it certain that I was going to be okay? What is really certain, if we're really being
Right.
honest?
Right.
So really, I just took a chance because I look at characters more than anything. I wanted to see about my life, and I got married 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. I made that choice. A lot of people be like, okay, well, is this in the row? No, we don't have anything. We're gonna do it anyway. I remember
Yes.
people are like, hey, you should wait until will it be over? I wanna
Exactly. When
establish it.
like you're right. When is that certainty gonna have? There's always gonna be some reason to not do something.
Exactly.
So you just have to take that leap of faith kind of at the right
Mm,
time. Whatever that is
exactly.
for you, whatever that looks like for you.
And for me, it's not so much what people know, Brea. It's their character I look at, because it's really, if someone
Mhm.
is able, I could just, it's just like the kid who stole from the cookie jar per se, and he goes without any prompt to say, I stole the cookie, I'm sorry,
Right.
versus someone who's just lying and pointing
Right.
at everyone else. It's just different. And I do look at that. I mentioned this because work on yourself. Don't be when you're driven by other people to make you happy. If I'm only happy if something else happens outside myself, it usually doesn't work well. I
Exactly.
and so I do encourage that. I want to say thank you, Bria, for coming on, sharing. It was long overdue, but I hope
I
to
know, I'm
probably have
sorry.
you back again. No problem. Anyway, thank you so much for joining and sharing your thoughts with us today. I just want to share with those listening. Remember to stay updated with Revive Ministries through various platforms, reviveministryfl.com. Also, all the notes will have Bria's links so you can check out what she is doing. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries with this last quote. It's timely. We just went. February was Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr. It says, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward."